If you are preparing for the ASWB Bachelor's, Master's, or Clinical exam, you already know that Erik Erikson's psychosocial stages of development are among the most frequently tested concepts on the entire exam. Yet, so many social work candidates lose easy points on these questions. Why? Because they simply memorize the chart without understanding how these stages present in clinical scenarios. The ASWB exam doesn't just ask you to match trust versus mistrust with infancy. It gives you a complex clinical vignette about a 32-year-old client who avoids committed relationships, and it asks you to identify the underlying developmental crisis or determine what the social worker should do next. In this video, we are going to move past simple memorization. We will build a deep, clinical intuition for all 8 stages, highlight the exact traps the exam writers use to trick you, and walk through 15 realistic practice questions step by step so you can apply this knowledge immediately. Let's get started. Before we dive into the theory, let's establish our learning objectives. By the end of this masterclass, you will be able to, first, instantly identify the correct psychosocial stage based on a client's age or developmental behavior. Second, recognize how successful resolution or developmental failure manifests in adult clients. Third, apply the concept of ego virtues to answer clinical questions. And fourth, navigate the complex vignettes where the client's developmental stage conflicts with their chronological age. Mastering these objectives will directly translate to a higher score on exam day. To understand Erikson, we must understand what he meant by a psychosocial crisis. Unlike Sigmund Freud, who focused primarily on psychosexual energy and biological drives, Erikson believed that personality development is shaped by the interaction between our biological needs and our social environment. A psychosocial crisis is not a catastrophe. It is a developmental turning point, a period of vulnerability and increased potential. During each stage, the individual faces a conflict between 2 opposing forces. One force is positive, leading to growth. The other is negative, leading to stagnation or regression. The goal is not to completely avoid the negative force, but to find a healthy balance with a strong leaning toward the positive. Resolving this crisis successfully results in the formation of an ego virtue, a psychological strength that helps the individual navigate subsequent stages. If a stage is not resolved successfully, the individual carries that conflict forward, making future stages much harder to master. Keep this in mind. On the ASWB exam, adult issues are almost always traced back to unresolved childhood crises. Let's look at Stage 1, Trust versus Mistrust. This stage spans from birth to approximately 18 months. Here, the infant is entirely dependent on their primary caregivers for survival, comfort, and security. The dynamic is straightforward. If caregivers are consistent, reliable, and emotionally available, the infant develops a sense of basic trust. They learn that the world is safe and that people are generally dependable. This successful resolution gives birth to the ego virtue of hope, the belief that even when things go wrong, needs will eventually be met. Conversely, if care is neglectful, inconsistent, or abusive, the infant develops basic mistrust. They learn to view the world as unpredictable, hostile, and dangerous. In clinical vignettes, an adult who struggles with deep paranoia is highly suspicious of the social worker or feels unable to rely on anyone, is often exhibiting unresolved issues from this first stage of development. Stage 2 is autonomy versus shame and doubt, occurring between 18 months and 3 years of age. Toddlers at this stage are developing physical control over their bodies and building independence. They want to choose their own clothes, feed themselves, and control their bodily functions through toilet training. If parents encourage self-care attempts, praise effort, and allow choices within safe boundaries, the child develops autonomy, a sense of self-confidence and personal control. This develops the ego virtue of willpower. However, if caregivers constantly criticize, mock mistakes, or over-control and do everything for the child develops shame and doubt in their own abilities. On the exam, look for adult clients who struggle with extreme self-doubt, exhibit high dependency on others for decision-making, or feel shame when trying to complete tasks independently. These patterns point back to an unresolved autonomy crisis. Stage 3 is initiative versus guilt, spanning ages 3 to 6. During these preschool years, children begin to assert power and control over their world through social interactions and play. They make up games, assign roles, and ask a constant stream of questions. When caregivers support this active play, encourage imagination, and answer questions patiently, the child develops initiative, the ability to plan and execute tasks. They feel secure in their capability to lead others. This resolution forms the virtue of purpose. But if a child's efforts to lead are met with punishment, criticism, or if parents treat their questions as a nuisance, the child develops guilt. They may feel that their desires and questions are annoying or wrong. Adults who present in therapy with a fear of taking leadership roles, who feel guilty whenever they prioritize their own goals, or who lack ambition, are often struggling with unresolved guilt from this preschool era. Stage 4 is industry versus inferiority, covering the school-age years from 6 to 12. The child's social world expands significantly to include teachers, peers, and academic challenges. The focus shifts to mastering specialized skills: reading, writing, sports, and social rules. If children are encouraged to work hard, complete tasks, and are recognized for their effort and achievements, they develop industry, a belief in their capacity to learn and succeed. They feel pride in their work. This leads to the virtue of competence. If, instead, a child repeatedly experiences failure without support, or if teachers and parents constantly criticize their academic or social performance, they develop inferiority. They begin to feel incompetent and less capable than their peers. On the exam, when you see a school-age client refusing to do homework, acting out in class to hide their academic struggles, or expressing that they can't do anything right, think industry versus inferiority. Stage 5 is identity versus role confusion, which spans adolescence from ages 12 to 18. This is a critical transition from childhood to adulthood. Teenagers are searching for a sense of self and personal identity, exploring values, beliefs, career goals, gender roles, and social groups. When adolescents are allowed to explore different paths and are supported in defining their own values, they develop a stable identity. They understand who they are and what they stand for, which establishes the virtue of fidelity, the ability to commit to others and stay true to oneself. If society or parents force a rigid identity on the teenager, or if the teen is unable to explore, they experience role confusion. They may struggle to establish a career direction, experience insecurity about their values, or drift aimlessly from one group to another. In ASWB vignettes, look for teenagers or young adults struggling with gender identity, career indecision, or falling into peer groups with negative behaviors just to belong. These are classic signs of role confusion. Stage 6 is intimacy versus isolation, occurring in young adulthood from ages 18 to 40. The primary task of this stage is to build deep, committed, and vulnerable relationships with others, both romantic and platonic. To achieve true intimacy, Erikson argued that an individual must first have a secure sense of identity from stage 5. If they do, they can share themselves with others without fear of losing their own identity. This successful resolution develops the virtue of love. If an individual has a weak sense of identity or fears vulnerability and rejection, they may avoid closeness. This leads to emotional isolation, loneliness, and sometimes depression. On the exam, watch for young adult clients who report a pattern of short, superficial relationships, avoid commitment, or isolate themselves socially. The root issue is often a struggle to resolve this intimacy versus isolation crisis. Stage 7 is generativity versus stagnation, which covers middle adulthood from ages 40 to 65. The primary focus here is making a positive contribution to the world and nurturing the next generation. This is often achieved through parenting, mentoring, volunteering, creating art, or building a meaningful career. When adults feel that they are leaving a legacy, contributing to their community, or helping younger generations succeed, they develop generativity. They feel a deep connection to the broader world. This resolution builds the virtue of care. Conversely, if an individual becomes self-absorbed, feels unproductive, or lacks a sense of purpose, they experience stagnation. They feel disconnected from society and may feel that their life is empty or meaningless. Look for exam questions involving middle-aged clients undergoing a midlife crisis, feeling unfulfilled in their career, or expressing that they have nothing to pass down to others. This points directly to stagnation. The final stage is Stage 8, Integrity versus Despair, which begins around age 65 and lasts through the end of life. During this period, individuals reflect on their life journey. They look back at their achievements, relationships, mistakes, and struggles. If they can look back with a sense of pride, acceptance, and completion, accepting both the good and the bad as necessary parts of their unique journey, they develop integrity. They do not fear death because they feel their life had meaning. This gives rise to the final virtue of wisdom. If, however, they look back and see only missed opportunities, failed relationships, and unresolved regrets, they experience despair. They feel bitter, angry, and fearful of death because they feel it is too late to start over. In exam vignettes, older adults who refuse medical treatment out of bitterness, express extreme regret about past family estrangements, or manifest deep anger about aging, are typically exhibiting developmental despair. Now that you understand the stages, let's look at how the ASWB exam will test you on them. There are two major traps you must avoid. First, the age trap. Many students get a question and immediately select an answer based purely on the client's chronological age. While age is your starting point, you must read the vignette carefully. If a 30-year-old client is behaving like a rebellious adolescent, searching for who they are and drifting between groups, they are clinically stuck in identity versus role confusion, not intimacy versus isolation. You must identify where the client is functioning developmentally, not just how old they are. Second, regression under crisis. When individuals experience severe trauma or major life stressors, they often regress to earlier stages. For example, a middle-aged adult who is hospitalized may regress to a state of dependency and mistrust. The exam expects you to recognize this regression and address the foundational crisis first. If a client doesn't trust the environment, you cannot work on their identity or intimacy issues. You must build trust first. To help you keep these developmental theories clear on the exam, let's look at this comparison table. The ASWB exam often tests your ability to cross-reference Erikson's psychosocial stages with Jean Piaget's cognitive stages and Sigmund Freud's psychosexual stages. For example, during infancy, when Erikson's focus is trust versus mistrust, Piaget's focus is the sensoromotor stage, and Freud's is the oral stage. During toddlerhood, autonomy versus shame corresponds with Piaget's late sensoromotor, or early preoperational stage, and Freud's anal stage. During the preschool years, initiative versus guilt aligns with Piaget's preoperational stage and Freud's phallic stage. During the school-age years, industry versus inferiority aligns with Piaget's concrete operational stage and Freud's latency stage. Finally, during adolescence, identity versus role confusion corresponds with Piaget's formal operational stage and Freud's genital stage. Take a screenshot of this table. It is a high-yield summary that will help you keep these stages separated. If you are struggling to memorize the order of the stages, here is a classic mnemonic system to help. Think of numbers that rhyme with the stage concept. 1 is a bun. Imagine a rusty bun. Rust sounds like trust, so stage 1 is trust versus mistrust. 2 is a shoe. Imagine an automatic shoe that ties itself. Auto stands for autonomy, so stage 2 is autonomy versus shame and doubt. 3 is a tree. Imagine a child taking the initiative to climb a tree, but they fall and feel guilty. So stage 3 is initiative versus guilt. 4 is a door. Imagine a door opening to a busy factory representing industry. So stage 4 is industry versus inferiority. 5 is a hive. Imagine a bee looking at a hive and wondering, who am I in this hive? That represents identity versus role confusion. 6 is sticks. Imagine 2 sticks leaning together in a close, intimate relationship. That represents intimacy versus isolation. 7 is heaven. Imagine a cloud in heaven generating rain for the earth below. That represents generativity versus stagnation. 8 is a plate. Imagine a plate holding a single, complete, whole cookie. You reflect on it with integrity or despair if it's gone. That represents integrity versus despair. Use these mental pictures to recall the stages quickly when you feel stressed during the exam. Let's practice applying this clinically. Consider this scenario. A school social worker meets with a 9-year-old male who has recently started refusing to complete math assignments. The teacher reports that when the child makes an error, he tears up his paper and says, "I'm stupid. I can't do anything right." How do we analyze this? First, look at the client's age, 9 years old. This places him squarely in stage 4, industry versus inferiority. Second, look at his behavior. He is comparing himself to academic standards, experiencing failure, and internalizing a sense of incompetence, saying, "I'm stupid." This is a classic presentation of unresolved industry versus inferiority, leaning heavily toward inferiority. As a social worker, your intervention should focus on building the child's confidence. You would not treat this as a behavior problem or assume he is lazy. You would look for ways to scaffold his learning, praise his effort over his performance, and provide opportunities where he can experience success, helping him move from a state of inferiority to industry. Let's look at question 1. A social worker at a community mental health center meets with a 24-year-old client who reports feeling lonely and isolated. The client states, "I want to have close friends and a partner, but every time I start getting close to someone, I pull back because I'm afraid they'll reject me when they find out who I really am." According to Erikson's theory, which developmental stage is this client struggling to resolve? A. Identity versus role confusion. B. Intimacy versus isolation. C. Autonomy versus shame and doubt. D. Trust versus mistrust. The client is 24 years old, which chronologically places them in young adulthood, or stage 6, intimacy versus isolation. The client explicitly expresses a desire for closeness, but struggles with vulnerability and fear of rejection, leading to isolation. Therefore, the correct answer is B, intimacy versus isolation. Option A, identity versus role confusion, is the preceding stage. While a weak identity can cause intimacy issues, the primary conflict described is the struggle to establish close relationships. Option C and D represent much earlier childhood stages. Although trust issues underlie relationship fears, the immediate developmental crisis for this 24-year-old is intimacy versus isolation. Question 2. An elementary school social worker is referred a 7-year-old student who frequently refuses to participate in group activities. When the teacher asks the student to read aloud, the student puts their head on the desk and begins to cry. The teacher notes that the student's academic skills are slightly behind their peers. What is the primary developmental conflict the student is experiencing? A. Autonomy versus shame and doubt. B. Initiative versus guilt. C. Industry versus inferiority. D. Identity versus role confusion. The client's age is 7, which corresponds to stage 4, industry versus inferiority, ages 6 to 12. The student is experiencing academic difficulties and is comparing themselves negatively to peers, resulting in avoidance behaviors like putting their head down and crying. The correct answer is C, industry versus inferiority. Option A, autonomy versus shame, is for ages 18 months to 3 years. Option B, initiative versus guilt, is for preschool-age children, 3 to 6 years, and focuses on planning play, not skill mastery or peer comparisons. Option D, identity versus role confusion, is for adolescents, 12 to 18 years. Question 3. A hospice social worker is counseling an 82-year-old client who has been diagnosed with a terminal illness. During the session, the client expresses deep bitterness about their life choices, stating, "I wasted my life chasing money, and now my children won't even speak to me." It's too late to fix anything. According to Erikson, which developmental outcome is this client displaying? A. Role confusion. B. Stagnation. C. Despair. D. Mistrust. The client is 82 years old, which places them in older adulthood, stage 8. They are looking back on their life and expressing severe regret, bitterness, and a sense that it is too late to make changes. This is the textbook definition of despair. The correct answer is C. Despair. Option A represents adolescence. Option B, stagnation, represents middle adulthood, ages 40 to 65, and focuses on a lack of current productivity, not a retrospective life review. Option D, mistrust, is from infancy. Question 4. A social worker conducts an assessment with a 45-year-old client who recently lost their job. The client states, "I feel like I've accomplished nothing of value in my life. I don't have children, my career was a dead end, and I have nothing to leave behind for the next generation." According to Erikson's theory, the client is most likely experiencing A. Isolation, B. Stagnation, C. Role confusion, D. Despair. The client is 45 years old, placing them in middle adulthood, ages 40 to 65. The core conflict of this stage is generativity versus stagnation. The client is expressing feelings of unproductivity and a lack of legacy. This describes stagnation. The correct answer is B. Stagnation. Option A, isolation, is the focus of young adulthood. Option C, role confusion, is the focus of adolescence. Option D, despair, is the focus of older adulthood. Question 5. A mother seeks advice from a social worker regarding her 2-year-old daughter. The mother states that the child insists on dressing herself every morning, which results in mismatched clothes and takes an excessive amount of time. The mother asks if she should stop this behavior. What is the best advice for the social worker to give? A. Advise the mother to dress the child to save time and establish parental authority. B. Recommend the child be allowed to dress herself to foster a sense of autonomy. C. Suggest the mother pick out the clothes, but let the child put them on to compromise. D. Tell the mother that this behavior is a sign of oppositional defiance. The child is 2 years old, which is the stage of autonomy versus shame and doubt. At this age, children assert independence by performing tasks on their own. Allowing the child to dress herself, even if it is slow or messy, builds autonomy. Therefore, the correct answer is B. Recommend the child be allowed to dress herself to foster a sense of autonomy. Option A would induce shame and doubt. Option C is a decent compromise, but B is the best answer because it directly addresses the developmental need for autonomy. Option D is incorrect because this behavior is developmentally normal, not pathologically defiant. Question 6. A social worker meets with a 15-year-old adolescent who is struggling with peer relationships. The client states, "I change the way I dress and act depending on who I'm hanging out with because I don't know who I really am yet." Which developmental stage is this client working to resolve? A. Initiative versus guilt. B. Industry versus inferiority. C. Identity versus role confusion. D. Intimacy versus isolation. The client is 15 years old, which places them in adolescence. They're explicitly struggling with self-definition and are modifying their behavior to fit into different peer groups. This is the core challenge of identity versus role confusion. The correct answer is C. Identity versus role confusion. Options A and B represent earlier stages. Option D, intimacy versus isolation, is the stage that follows, which cannot be successfully resolved until a secure identity is formed. Question 7. A social worker at a parent-child resource center observes a mother interacting with her 9-month-old infant. The infant cries when hungry, but the mother routinely ignores the cries for hours, stating she needs to learn to self-soothe. According to Erikson, what is the infant at risk of developing? A. Shame and doubt. B. Guilt. C. Mistrust. D. Inferiority. The infant is 9 months old, which falls under stage 1, trust versus mistrust. When caregivers fail to respond consistently to an infant's basic needs like hunger, The infant learns that their environment is unreliable and unsafe. The correct answer is C, mistrust. Option A, shame and doubt, is the negative outcome of toddlerhood. Option B, guilt, is the negative outcome of preschool age. Option D, inferiority, is the negative outcome of school age. Question 8. A social worker is assessing a 5-year-old child in a preschool setting. The teacher notes that the child is highly imaginative and loves to invent pretend scenarios, but often becomes anxious and withdraws when other children reject their ideas. According to Erikson, the child is navigating which stage? A. Autonomy versus shame and doubt. B. Initiative versus guilt. C. Industry versus inferiority. D. Trust versus mistrust. The child is 5 years old. This age falls in the preschool range, 3 to 6 years, where the developmental conflict is initiative versus guilt. The child is taking initiative by inventing games and using their imagination, but experiences anxiety and guilt when their ideas are rejected. The correct answer is B, initiative versus guilt. Option A is for toddlers. Option C is for school-age children. Option D is for infants. Question 9. A 35-year-old client seeks therapy after a series of failed romantic relationships. The client states, "I always end up leaving because I feel like I'm losing myself in the other person. I don't know who I am outside of a relationship." The social worker should first assess the client's resolution of which stage? A. Trust versus mistrust. B. Autonomy versus shame and doubt. C. Identity versus role confusion. D. Intimacy versus isolation. The client is 35, which chronologically places them in the intimacy versus isolation stage. However, the client's struggle is that they lose themselves and do not know who they are outside of a relationship. Erikson posited that a stable sense of identity, stage 5, is a prerequisite for achieving true intimacy. Because the client lacks a clear identity, they cannot form healthy intimacy. Therefore, the social worker must first assess their identity formation. The correct answer is C, identity versus role confusion. Although the client is currently in the age range for intimacy versus isolation, the underlying block is their lack of identity. Assessing the foundational block, stage 5, must come first. Question 10. An 8-year-old child's parents divorce, and the child begins wetting the bed and refusing to sleep alone, behaviors they had previously outgrown. According to developmental theory, the social worker should understand this as A. Oppositional behavior designed to punish the parents. B. Regression to an earlier stage due to environmental stress. C. A permanent developmental delay caused by trauma. D. A lack of industry and competence. When children experience major stressors like parental divorce, it is common for them to regress to earlier developmental stages, such as bedwetting or separation anxiety, to seek security. This is a temporary coping mechanism, not permanent damage or defiance. The correct answer is B, regression to an earlier stage due to environmental stress. Option A attributes negative intent to a normal stress response. Option C is overly pathologizing. Option D misapplies the concept of industry. Question 11. A social worker conducts a support group at a senior center. A 72-year-old member shares, "I spent my life working as a teacher, and seeing my former students succeed makes me feel like my time on earth was well spent." This statement represents which developmental outcome? A. Generativity. B. Integrity. C. Autonomy. D. Industry. The member is 72, which is in older adulthood. They are reflecting on their life as a whole and expressing a sense of satisfaction, peace, and meaning. This is the definition of integrity. The correct answer is B, integrity. Option A, generativity, is the focus of middle adulthood. While their teaching career was generative, the retrospective reflection at age 72 represents integrity. Options C and D are childhood outcomes. Question 12. A 50-year-old client reports feeling bored, unproductive, and stuck in their career and personal life. The client states, "I just go to work, come home, watch TV, and do it all over again. I don't feel like I'm making any difference." The social worker should help the client explore opportunities for A. self-reflection and life review. B. Formulating a stable personal identity. C. Generativity and community contribution. D. Building intimate peer relationships. The client is 50, placing them in the generativity versus stagnation stage. They are exhibiting clear signs of stagnation. To resolve this crisis, the social worker should help them find ways to contribute to others or their community. The correct answer is C. Generativity and community contribution. Option A is for older adults in the integrity stage. Option B is for adolescents. Option D is for young adults. Question 13. A social worker is working with a 13-year-old client who has recently immigrated to the United States. The client is struggling to adapt to the new culture and reports feeling torn between their parents' traditional values and the cultural norms of their peers. This struggle is best understood within which stage? A. Industry versus inferiority. B. Identity versus role confusion. C. Intimacy versus isolation. D. Initiative versus guilt. The client is 13, an adolescent. They are struggling to integrate their family's traditional values with peer cultural norms, which is a classic identity crisis. Cultural identity is a core component of Erikson's Stage 5. The correct answer is B. Identity versus role confusion. Option A is for school-age children, 6 to 12. Option C is for young adults. Option D is for preschoolers. Question 14. Which of the following describes the developmental virtue associated with Erikson's stage of autonomy versus shame and doubt? A. Purpose. B. Willpower. C. Competence. D. Fidelity. This is a recall question, which does appear on the ASWB exam. You need to match the stage with its associated ego virtue. Autonomy versus shame and doubt is resolved by developing willpower. The correct answer is B. Willpower. Option A, purpose, is associated with initiative versus guilt. Option C, competence, is associated with industry versus inferiority. Option D, fidelity, is associated with identity versus role confusion. Question 15. A social worker at a hospital is working with a 30-year-old client who has been hospitalized for a chronic illness. The client is highly resistant to medical care, refuses to answer the nurse's questions, and accuses the staff of trying to poison them. The social worker should recognize that the client's behavior represents a regression to which developmental stage? A. Autonomy versus shame and doubt. B. Trust versus mistrust. C. Initiative versus guilt. D. Industry versus inferiority. The client is 30, but under the stress of hospitalization and chronic illness, they have regressed. Their behavior, extreme suspicion, refusing to cooperate, and accusing others of harm, shows a complete lack of basic trust in their caregivers and environment. This represents a regression to Stage 1. The correct answer is B. Trust versus mistrust. Option A would involve struggles with control and independence. Option C would involve guilt over taking action. Option D would involve feelings of incompetence. The paranoia and extreme lack of safety point directly to mistrust. How did you do on those 15 questions? If you got most of them right, you're in excellent shape for developmental questions on the ASWB exam. If you struggled with some of the clinical rationales, go back and watch the deep dive sections for those specific stages. Remember, the key to passing the ASWB exam is practice. You need to train your brain to read a clinical paragraph, identify the age, isolate the developmental behavior, and select the intervention that matches. To practice more questions like these, head over to myaswbpracticeexam.com. We have full-length mock exams, diagnostic quizzes, interactive flashcards, and comprehensive study guides tailored to the BSW, MSW, and clinical exams. If this video was helpful, please hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, and share it with your fellow social work students. Good luck with your studies, and I will see you in the next masterclass.